Welcome to In Substantia. I'm Gabor Farkas. As Switzerland prepares to vote on whether to adopt a government-led electronic identity system, the stakes could not be clearer. Digital identity is no longer an abstract technical concern. It has become essential for everything, from banking and healthcare to interacting with public services. Yet, how we manage these identities and who should be trusted to provide them remains hotly contested. 3 years ago, Swiss citizens rejected a proposal that would have left the management of eIDs in private hands, sending a strong signal about concerns for privacy, data control, and the proper role of the state. Now, with the new public eID proposal on the table, Switzerland faces the challenge of rebuilding trust, defining best practice for privacy and security, and ensuring that the system is both robust and future-proof. Globally, countries are experimenting with three main approaches. Some rely on centralized government-managed systems, promising integration but raising concerns about surveillance and data protection. Others let private companies lead, which can drive innovation but also expose citizens to commercial use of their data. A third path, self-sovereign identity, puts individuals in control, though its real-world viability is still being tested. Where does the Swiss model fit? What can it teach us about balancing security, privacy, and public accountability in a digital age? And what are the implications for citizens, institutions, and the evolving relationship between the individual and the state? Today, we examine these questions in the context of the upcoming national vote with the help of Dr. Rolf Rauschenbach from the Federal Office of Justice, the agency responsible for Switzerland's new eID project. Welcome, Dr. Rauschenbach. You are the eID Communication Officer at the Federal Office of Justice. Would you please tell us about your background, how you got to be where you are, and what your role is?
Of course. First of all, thank you for the invitation to your podcast. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you, and I hope that I can give all the answers to your important questions. To quickly talk about myself and then focus obviously on the topic of eID. I have joined the federal government almost 3 years ago in this role as information officer. Prior to that, I was working for a IT company based in Switzerland, in Zurich. It's called Procivis, quite known also for working on the topic of electronic identities. I've had a number of roles in that company. In the end, I was head of sales. By training, I am a political scientist. I have a PhD in political science and have had a number of roles both in academia and in the private sectors before.
Thank you. You're also a podcaster at govtechpodcast.ch. Regrettably, it's only in German, and I have to cheerfully recognize that my German is not good enough to appreciate it. No episodes since 2022 have been released. Will you produce more?
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. By now, I call that almost youth sin, this podcast. No, seriously. I started that podcast a few years ago, and when I joined the federal government, I had to give up this project as I was mainly focusing on GovTech projects at the federal level. And since I am now involved in one myself, and even with a public role as information officer, it was just not the right thing to continue. So at the moment it's dormant. Who knows if at a later point I will reactivate it, but at the moment no further activities planned. But I'm very happy to be back on a podcast now with you.
Thank you. So first, maybe let's explore with you the basics. As I say in my introduction, in 2021, Swiss citizens voted against a proposed eID law. What was the Federal Office of Justice's initial definition or perception of what eID is or should be?
Obviously, the need for an electronic identity was a given since already quite a long time. There've been other projects prior to the one that was rejected in 21, anyway, also in other federal agencies. But actually, or interestingly, there was a certain confusion about this initial project in 21, if it was now electronic identity or rather a login. That was also something which added to the difficulty of the federal government to actually convince the population that was a good project. But basically, the idea was to provide a means of identification in order to push the digital transformation of Switzerland overall. However, in 21, the proposal was, as you mentioned already, that the electronic identities would not be issued by the federal government, but by private companies mainly. And that was not appreciated by the people at the ballot. First of all, exactly due to the role of the involvement of private actors, and secondly also because at that time a traditional centralized identity provider approach was suggested, which from a data privacy point of view was not considered ideal, and that also added to the motivation to reject that initial law.
Oddly, that private company has quite a strong hold already in the Swiss economy because, for instance, the Swiss Post uses their services. And if you want to use the Swiss Post's online services, you have to go. You don't really have a choice. For a long time you did, but now you have to go and use these services. I suppose the result of the 2021 votes will partially explain why. Beyond that, how has this definition changed with the new project?
I would say it's pretty straightforward, or I should put it differently. The rejection of the initial law was just a rejection and basically a abortion of the project. There was no mandate anymore to work on this topic from a political or legal point of view. However, only a few days after this vote, there were motions in the parliament by all parties with the same wording for a state-issued trustworthy electronic identity. And this was then the reinitiation of this topic, and that is the basis of, or that is the political mandate we are now working on. And as the title of these motions already imply, and also the result of the vote of the referendum, the state should be the issuer, and the trustworthiness, the privacy concerns should have been taken into account. And this is basically what we have been working on since these early days after the rejection of the initial law.
What are the unique challenges of implementing a nationwide eID system in a country as decentralized and privacy conscious as Switzerland?
There are actually really a lot of different challenges. I would not say that there is one unique one. The fact that Switzerland, with its federal structure and its rather decentralized organization, poses one, but I would not even argue that this is the most important one, since there is an overall understanding that what the issuance of the electronic identity is concerned, that this is a role of the state and of the federal government as the central unique actor in that space. There, the cantons and the municipalities do not really have an important role to play. Obviously, they are consulted and so on, but the basic assumption is that federal government is responsible for issuing the electronic identities. But now, getting back to your question, what are challenges in that respect? I would say, in the first place, obviously, there is this political challenge to come up with a law that satisfies the political expectations of the parliament, but also of the general public, in a domain which is, let's put it that way, at least not easy accessible to everybody. Tech savviness is something that is building up slowly in the population and also in the parliament. That is the first challenge. And there are obviously a number of sub-challenges related to that. We maybe get into the details later. Then the second really big chunk of challenges I would categorize in the domain of technology. As you mentioned in your introduction, there are different architectures, different approaches, different concepts of electronic identities. And when you go into further details, there are many more questions than just the three concepts you presented. And it's a highly dynamic field, even more so when you look at the third proposal, SSI, which is so far much more of a philosophy and idea than something that has been already implemented many times. So there are many technological challenges that arise in that context. And I believe that is actually the most hard one, the most difficult one, and that is adoption. You can come up with a beautiful law, you can come up with a great engineering project or product, but then in the end, you, me, your son, my grandmother, and so on, everybody should use it or should feel keen to use it. And that is still a different question. Maybe politically all good, technically all good, but then adoption is still a different ballgame. I would simply mention these three different areas of challenges to start with.
Since you brought it up, maybe we can start by this and see what steps are being taken to build public trust and educate the Swiss population about the eID system's benefits and security.
So, as the federal government experienced with this referendum in 21 a paradoxical situation, because on the one hand, the government itself said, this eID thing, it's quite complicated, it's quite dynamic, it's not exactly what we are good at. Let's rather leave that to private companies. And then the citizens said, no, you have to do it. We trust you more and we think you're able to do so. There was this paradoxical situation of trust or mistrust, competence, know-how, yes, no. And it was very clear from the beginning of the new project that a way of doing and preparing and communicating this project would have to involve a lot of transparency and participation. And overall, if you look what we have done so far in that respect, is that we have established a number of unique channels how to interact with the general public. My role as information officer just for one project is unique within the federal government. Normally, an IT project has not its own communications officer. So we started to publish a lot of stuff, documentation, presentations, and so on GitHub, where we also do offline discussions. We organize almost every month a so-called participation meeting. Normally it is a public video conference. Anybody can join in, where we talk about the current status of our project. Very often we have also external speakers who tell us about the latest news from the electronic identity project in the EU or in another country, or a vendor is showing us some use case they have implemented to actually share and build up a know-how within the wider community. This transparency and participation-driven approach has allowed us to build up a community, which so far, I have to be very clear, still is in a rather nerd bubble operating. We have normally about 250 people now participating in these participation meetings every month, but that is obviously not yet the general public.
Are the participants, the meetings, are they held in German exclusively, or can people speaking French or Italian who are not able to communicate in German able to participate? Or is English very present and used as lingua franca in order to exchange, as it's often the case?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there I definitely have different souls in my heart or my chest. But since we represent the federal government, we mainly stick to the official languages of the Confederation. The participation meetings are mainly in German. I try to summarize or sometimes talk also a little bit in French, so that also the French part of Switzerland is addressed. The slides normally are bilingual, so we really try to do our best on that side. Italian and Romansh is definitely not present, since I do not speak these two languages. But when it comes to English, we have started, I think it's now the third time that we have done it. After the regular participation meeting, we do what we call a executive summary in English. There it is normally myself and the colleague, and we run through the whole program, just the two of us, without external speakers, and we summarize the messages of each presentation or contribution, so that people who do not speak French or German also have the access to this information. And so far we normally have about 50 people or so listening to that. All these participation meetings are recorded and published on YouTube, so people who are not able to join on that specific date can watch and listen to this content also later. We really try to be as accessible and open as possible also to the international community. You mentioned it in your introduction. Interoperability with other jurisdictions is an important topic, and for that reason we believe, or we do that also, so that people from outside of Switzerland can also get easily information on that topic. Also, our website is in German, French, Italian, and English. All press releases and so on are in English. And actually, when it comes to technical documentation on GitHub, often it's only in English.
I looked at the website in both French and English. I started with the English side. I don't know why I was taking there to the English pages, and the video, which is very well done, explaining the project on the English side, is only in German. So that's why I had to switch to the French version in order to get the video in French. Out of curiosity, do you use any AI to help you summarize the conversations that take place during these meetings?
No, so far I use only my little brain for all of this. I am familiar with these new tools. I have tried them out privately a little bit, and I would love to use them also in my professional work. But I didn't manage to really find the time to get used and practice it. But I'm sure that some of my stuff could be improved by doing so. In some cases, actually, when you talk about the videos, when I was doing the storylining and so on, I used a little bit of ChatGPT to find the best variation of some formulations and so on. Yes, but that's really anecdotal.
Yes, it's very handy. So let's move on and look at other challenges, important ones. So how does the Swiss project ensure data privacy, and what measures are in place to protect citizens' personal information?
There actually, it caught my attention in your introduction. You were somehow opposing data protection and security. And I would actually say they are very much interlinked and not really opposed to each other. I would rather argue maybe you have on the one hand data privacy and security, and on the other hand then ease of use, comfort, user experience. And there we often have to somehow find a balance. Now when it comes to the data protection and security, maybe the most important aspect, I would say, and there we have a reference to the self-sovereign identity approach, is that the electronic identity of each person exists only once, and it is stored on their smartphone, on their device. And so we do not create new honeypots where all the different identities are stored in one place, and if a hack would be possible, you would have access to all the identities of Switzerland. We do not that. Each electronic identity is stored in a decentralized manner on the device of the holder. So that is one important point. Obviously, the electronic identity is stored on the smartphone in a so-called wallet. That is a container where you can receive, store, and then also present your electronic identity as a so-called verifiable credential. This wallet is a smartphone app. We, the federal government, are developing these apps. Here we apply really highest standards in order to protect your data on your smartphone. The electronic identity, for example, will be bound to your device. It is impossible to transfer your electronic identity from one device to another one. If you would try to do so, you would destroy it, basically. So that is another important measure to secure your data and to make sure that you as a holder are always in control of your data. Then the next feature is that once you use your electronic identity, you are not obliged to use it fully all the time. You can, if need be, only present certain aspects of your electronic identity. Instead of saying, I am Rolf, I am born and so on, and I can present a proof that I'm, for example, older than 18 years old, and therefore I'm eligible to certain services and products. And there, the data privacy is in this possibility to selectively disclose my data. And then maybe last point is very important to mention. Since you are in charge of your, or since you are in control of your data on your device, you are also in charge, you are responsible, you have to take care of your stuff. It is not the government who is doing that. Exactly, because if the government would do so, it would also know what you're doing with your data and could access it and could control or monitor your behavior. We do not want to do. But what we from the federal government clearly want to do is to provide you as a user and holder information about the actors, be it verifiers or issuers, how trustworthy they are. And for that, you will get specific information in your wallet in order to guide you a little bit if it is maybe not such a good idea to share your data with this or that actor.
So there are a lot of follow-up questions that come to me after what you said. How can multiple nationalities cohabit on one device? Because some people have multiple nationalities. Will you need different devices? And if you are a Swiss citizen, does it have to be on a device that has a Swiss phone number, or can it be a foreign number? But I suppose also one question, because you say that it's attached to one device, it's more or less the same thing that we experience with the PostFinance bank card, or whenever we get a new phone, we transfer it, but we cannot transfer it directly for it to work. How will that process be organized?
Okay, so that was a bunch of questions. I'm not sure if I will remember all of them, but otherwise asking. Let's start with a very simple one. You don't need a Swiss phone number to be able to obtain your Swiss electronic identity. For example, Swiss citizens living abroad are obviously also eligible to get a electronic identity, and they may have a smartphone with a number from any other country. No problem at all. The phone number actually is really totally irrelevant. What is important is that you have access to internet by WLAN or whatever. So the phone number is really no issue. We will never ask your phone number in that process, or at least maybe in the context of support, but not in the context of the electronic identity as an information that is then shared or shareable. That is one question. Now, when you also asked about people with multiple nationalities, there what happens is the following. Who actually can get a electronic identity provided by the Swiss government? Obviously, Swiss people can get electronic identity. The condition there is that they have a valid identity card or a valid passport issued by the Swiss government. If they have additional passports from other countries, that is perfectly okay, but we don't really care about that. Now, if you are a foreigner living in Switzerland legally and you have foreign person's permit card, then you are also eligible for the electronic identity, and you will get a Swiss electronic identity which states your nationality, which obviously is not Switzerland but some other country, and that's it. And you can have that on a smartphone with a Swiss phone number or another phone number. That's
Okay.
perfectly fine. I can add also, some people have more than one smartphone. Maybe one for private purposes, one for professional purposes, or whatever. That is also possible in the context of the eID. You can issue multiple electronic identities to different devices. Obviously, it always states the same thing, that you are Rolf Rauschenbach and so on, but you can have that on multiple devices. Now, in the case that you change your device because you want a new smartphone, or you have lost your old one, or it got even worse, stolen, or whatever, then obviously the electronic identity on that smartphone, on that old smartphone, is gone, lost forever, and not retrievable. And if you want on your new device a new electronic identity, you have to onboard again and get a new one issued to the new device.
If someone loses his phone or the phone is stolen, what dangers are there that someone can maliciously use someone else's identity?
Well, that is basically a question on how securely, how you have secured your smartphone. If you have secured your smartphone with Face ID or a PIN code, which is long enough and so on, the person who has stolen your smartphone should not be able to even open your smartphone. The wallet then will be again protected with Face ID or another code. That cannot be disabled. So I would say normally nobody should be able, even if he or she is has stolen your phone, then access your eID. But you always, as it is also the case in the analogous world, if somebody has stolen your normal wallet with your documents, you can go to a police station and let them know that your passport or your identity card has been stolen, and then the police puts that on a list and declares it as invalid. And then, and for the electronic version, that is even more powerful, because there we can really technically disable the use of your electronic identity. Not on your smartphone, there we don't have access, but whenever you present a electronic identity, the so-called verifier, the third party to whom you're presenting your eID, verifies the validity of your electronic identity by exactly going to a registry where all the revoked, disabled, nullified eIDs are listed. And then this verifier knows, oh, this eID has been stolen or is an old one because the user has changed its device. They don't get this information, but it has been revoked. And then obviously a thief could not use your eID.
Before going into too much
No
detail
problem.
and moving on, there's one thing that differentiates Swiss ID documents from documents in other countries. So in Germany, for instance, people, and in Spain, people have their address in their ID card, not on their passport. In different countries, the address is on both passports and ID cards. In Switzerland, it's on none of these documents. So will that be attached to the eID?
No. No, the information that is included in the eID is almost the same as on the identity card. The proposal, and I should insist, the proposal is still in the parliament. It is not yet valid law, but the proposal is that to not include the height of a person, as it is the case on the analogous identity card. On Swiss identity cards, we have also a peculiarity, which is the place of origin, as opposed to the place of birth.
Yes, I forgot to mention that. Yes.
Oh, good. And here we have made the compromise to actually include both, to not abandon the place of origin, which is a very Swiss thing, but to include the attribute of the place of birth in order to become, from a semantical point of view, more compatible with other countries. That is an attribute that has been added. Then another attribute that is proposed to be added also is the how to say, the social security number, in German AHV-Nummer, or Numero AWS. That is not part of the passport or the identity card, the analogous one, but it shall be part of the electronic identity. And in this social security number by law can only be used in the context of government, not in the context of private companies. And last but not least, a further attribute is added to the electronic identity, and that is exactly where it is stated which document has been used to issue the electronic identity. In the case of a Swiss person, it will state this electronic identity has been issued based on a passport or on a identity card. In the case of foreigners, it will state this identity card has been issued based on a foreign permits card category A, B, C, S, or whatever it is. And yeah, so I would say these are the main differences between the information that a electronic identity will provide as in comparison to the analogous documents. Now, your question started with the issue of the home address, the postal address of the person, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that will definitely not be part of the electronic identity. However, and I think it's time to start talking also about that. The federal government has decided to use the infrastructure that is necessary to issue and verify an electronic identity, not only for this credential electronic identity, but also for other credentials, for other electronic proofs, for other documents, if you will. And there, when we talk about the home address, I would refer to the certificate of residency that municipalities in Switzerland issue, confirming that the person lives in this municipality at a specific address, and which is required in a number of transactions here in Switzerland. So would need to prove or present your official address, then you would be required to go to your municipality and get issued the certificate of residency as an additional verifiable credential, which then will be sent also to your wallet, and that you can then present to a third party if need be.
Your answers are bringing up so many questions that I haven't thought ahead of time. And I'd like to go there just quickly because you mentioned that the eID will say whether it is based on the ID card or the passport, which is important because when you're traveling and you go to a country where a visa is required, will you be able to have visa issued and attached to your eID and have them in your wallet if it's a passport? And if it's not, but because you've used an ID card, will you need a second one that is based on your passport?
Okay, very good question. And unfortunately here my question will be maybe not happy as your question implies for what kind of hopes you attach to the electronic identity. What I have to state very clearly, in the beginning, when we launched the electronic identity, it will not be a travel document. The electronic identity basically and initially was designed to be used on the internet, in the digital realm, where we don't have national borders as in the analogous world. Obviously, there are use cases, and why not using an electronic identity also for travel purposes? However, this interoperability, this mutual recognition across borders is still a little bit further away. We are working on what we call the technological interoperability to make sure that we are as flexible and open and or even already compatible with other jurisdictions, in particular the European Union, but potentially also others, that we are working on. We have good contacts and follow these developments very carefully. But then on top of the technical interoperability, we also have to achieve what we call regulatory interoperability, which means a legal recognition of our eID vis-à-vis the eID, for example, issued by a member state of the European Union. And there we have not even started to negotiate such a treaty. We don't have yet the law, we don't have yet a system that is productive, so that is a little bit early. But in the middle or long run, I don't want to say year, it definitely is the goal to get to the point where your electronic identity, be it the one that is as we issue it now or a different format, can also be used as a travel document.
We'll get to that a little bit later. Let's go back to other issues that are of concern. How does the eID project address legal concerns around data sovereignty and citizen rights in the digital sphere?
Okay, so maybe the most basic concern is this electronic identity a must? Does everybody need to have one, or is it optional? And here it is very clear the electronic identity is a optional offer to the Swiss population, but it is not something that you have to use. I think that is the most fundamental liberty in that context. But then if you opt to get an electronic identity, obviously you have the right to be protected as much as possible. And there I would refer to my answers with regard to how we ensure data privacy and security, where we really try to make sure that things are taken care properly.
Maybe briefly look at what ethical considerations are factored into the eID system, especially regarding inclusivity and accessibility for all Swiss residents.
Of course, there actually we have a specific federal law which states that all digital products and services provided by the federal government have to comply with high standards of accessibility for people who have certain handicaps. And I can assure you, we are working very hard on that. It's not trivial to get to solutions which are accessible, but we are working hard on that with experts, and we are looking forward to getting feedback on our first versions to then further improve. But it is definitely clear that we have to take care of that, because in the end of the day, I would argue that in particular people who have certain disadvantages might actually profit from this kind of service because they do not have to a counter, and so they are much more independent if they can use the service digitally.
Earlier, you were referring to SSI, and I forgot to mention that SSI is what stands for self-sovereign identity, right? In a self-sovereign identity model, individuals have greater control over their identities without reliance on a central authority. What is the government's role in ensuring safe digital identities while respecting individual autonomy?
Yes, when we take the concept of self-sovereign identity to the orthodox maximum, obviously a government has no place in it. That is very clear, because ideally in a totally self-sovereign context, I would confirm your identity and you would confirm my identity as independent and not state agents or whatever. And this is obviously not what we're doing. The federal government as central agency issues the electronic identity and is the single source of truth. There we have, I fully agree, a fundamental difference or clash between what we do and what the proposal of self-sovereign identities is. But however, the concept of self-sovereign identity has a number of other concepts also which we are able to implement. And there I would again refer to the fact that we have this decentralized storage of the identities on a device with each holder, the selective disclosure, and so on. And then also the fact that we are opening this so-called trust infrastructure to other issuers. As I mentioned, it is only the federal government which is allowed or legally supposed to issue electronic identities. However, other public government bodies, but also private companies or even private persons can also issue verifiable credentials on the same infrastructure, using the same wallet, using the same registry, and so on, and issue other kind of verifiable credentials, be it whatever they deem relevant. And there, this self-sovereign idea comes very much into play.
This is a philosophical debate to some extent. Self-sovereign identity puts control back into the hands of individuals. How does Switzerland eID systems compare, and how would you respond to those who feel digital identity should be fully user-controlled?
Well, I would say when we talk about user control, we have a very high level of user control in the Swiss system. First of all, you are deciding if you want to get one or not. Once you have it, it is on your device, and only when you decide to actually present this data, it goes out of your device. Otherwise, you're fully in control. I would say this user control aspect is taken care to a very high level, but obviously it is a state issued identity. It is not identity issued by myself to myself or something like that. That is, there we have the contradiction or the difference between these different approaches.
Pseudonymity allows individuals to interact online under consistent, non-identifying alias that can still be linked to their real identity if necessary, because accountability is really important. This concept is crucial for fostering privacy and security in digital interactions, especially when dealing with sensitive online activities. In light of this, how might government eID system support pseudonymity? Could such a framework balance user privacy with the needs of legal accountability?
Okay, so there we can say it very clearly that the current proposal of the law does not foresee such a solution with pseudonymity as you're proposing it. I understand the use cases, but that is not the proposal put forward by the Parliament at the moment. However, as I mentioned, the infrastructure could be used to issue also a verifiable credential which is pseudonymous or totally anonymous. And actually, one could think of a business idea that somebody, a private organization, could start issuing such verifiable credentials based on an electronic identity, but then issuing on top of that a other credential with a pseudonym.
Might that be the business model that the existing companies that are already providing credentials are thinking of going into?
I don't know, but I would argue that it's definitely not the only business model that is available to companies. I mean, as a private firm, you can think of all kinds of credentials or confirmations, certificates that are today issued either on paper or on PDF or whatever, but which are not so easily machine readable and not so easily integrated seamlessly in digital processes. And in the future, one can imagine that many of these credentials or this information, this data related exactly to me personally, could be issued as a verifiable credential within this ecosystem that we are proposing to simplify the life of their clients, but also their own life with their processes. I believe there is definitely also business case, mainly driven by efficiency.
Who owns the data and what kind of control citizens have over what data is shared with third parties or public institutions?
The ownership of data is a difficult topic, if I may say so. But from a technical point, it's very straightforward. It is the holder who holds the data on its device. And only if the holder gives the consent to share data with a third party, this data then goes to this third party. So the ownership of data, if there is such a thing, is with the holder, the person that is actually concerned.
How will the Swiss eID system integrate with existing digital services within Switzerland and with systems across Europe, where the eIDAS regulation establishes the framework for electronic identification and trust services for electronic transactions in the internal market? You know the eIDAS regulation well because you were a keynote speaker at the Bitcoin conference in 2023 on that topic.
Okay, so let's start with the integration of this eID infrastructure into the legacy context of Switzerland. There, we are already having many talks with different actors, be it in the public sector, but also in the private sector, to showcase how the electronic identity can be used to integrate in various processes, services, and so on. But I am not going to deny this will be a lot of work. And a lot of hard work, often provoking not only some sort of technical work, but also maybe an adaptation of processes, maybe even of organizations. Because if we do everything right, the electronic identity will really be able to simplify stuff considerably. And this will be a job that will take quite some time. And in that respect, we really hope that the electronic identity provided by the federal government will be one of the important levers to actually drive the digital transformation of the public sector, but also of the private sector. Maybe that's on the Swiss side. Now, interoperability with other jurisdictions, in particular the European Union. There I mentioned that we are definitely trying to avoid to build a Helvetic Island solution, which is only usable within Switzerland. That doesn't make any sense at all. But it is very clear that here again, a lot of different topics have to be tackled. I think on a technical point of view, that the systems theoretically or technically can speak to each other. We are on a quite good path, since also the European Union is adopting very similar concepts, SSI inspired. And you mentioned it, once in a while I'm also active in Beyond Switzerland, and that is not only myself. We have very good contacts with a number of member states of the EU, with the European Commission itself, but also with a number of other countries around the globe. And there maybe I can mention also the Open Wallet initiative. I don't know if you've heard about that, but and also, or in particular from the point of view of International Geneva, a quite interesting thing. Here, a number of people created the awareness that wallets to store, receive, and present verifiable credentials will play the longer the more an important role. And if we want to achieve interoperability between different countries, these wallets somehow need to speak the same languages, adhere to similar standards, and so on. And for that reason was a foundation created, the Open Wallet Foundation. It is a sub-foundation of the Linux Foundation, a very important open source project in the domain of service and other infrastructure. And this Open Wallet Foundation has, among other activities, also a governmental advisory committee in which Switzerland is also part, and where different countries meet and discuss the questions of interoperability. Now it has become clear that a foundation as a private institution is not the best place for all countries to meet, and for that reason a new committee or a new body will be created called the Open Wallet Forum. It will be part of the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union umbrella. And there we will have a multilateral body to tackle all issues related to interoperability and wallets. And the ITU is based in Geneva. And
Yes.
the Federal Confederation is very motivated to help this process. And there are a number of interesting news that will be shared, I think, rather soon in that respect. But it should show that the Federal Confederation takes this interoperability issue really seriously. But it is still a lot of work.
So at this conference, eIDAS 2.0 was discussed. How has it evolved, and how does it make the inclusion of the Swiss eID project easier or harder?
As I mentioned, the philosophy of eIDAS 2.0 is very similar to the one that we are now proposing to adopt, and hopefully soon will be law. In that respect, it is the fact that the European Union is working on similar concepts is inspiring, helpful, motivating, and I think overall we are quite in sync. As I mentioned again, so far on a technological point of view. Obviously, there might be some differences, but at the moment that is not something that is of really major concern to me.
What kind of feedback mechanisms are being considered or implemented to allow citizens to voice concerns or provide input on the system once it is operational?
Okay, once it's operational, obviously you still can get in touch with us anytime and provide us with feedback. But I think now is a better moment since we're still developing the stuff. Once we launch the productive system, obviously it will evolve all the time. But people who are interested in contributing to the Swiss electronic identity are highly welcome to join us on GitHub, to join us on these participation meetings. Actually, the next one, it will be held on December the 6th. Once a year, we do a daily hybrid participation meeting where people come to Bern, to Oberzollikofen, where the Federal Office of Information Technology and Telecommunication is located. And for one day, we discuss all matters eID. We have about 150 seats. Still a few are available. Please register and come and join the debate. Once the product is actually launched, we are still working on the different communication channels, but definitely there will be a feedback possibility. Because in the end of the day, that is very clear, and I stated the main challenge is adoption. So we do this whole thing not for us, not for the government, we do it for the people, and they have to understand it, they have to like it, so that they actually use it, and the feedback is important. We do now already a lot of user testing and so on. Maybe I can also mention that we have started a pilot project already a few months ago, so far only in the very small canton of Appenzell-Ausserrhoden, with the driver's license permit. At the moment only for people who are doing the training. It's not yet the final driver's license. And we have learned a lot with this pilot project. It will be expanded next year to all Switzerland. We expect by the end of next year about 100,000 people using already this service. And there again, feedback is very welcome.
It will be expanded to all learners,
yes.
Not to all drivers.
Yes, next year it will be expanded to all learners. Very important, exactly. The mobile driver's license for normal drivers will come then once the electronic identity has been introduced. Hopefully on the same day already. We try to be ready for that, so that you would get into your wallet the electronic identity and also your driver's license.
What role will emerging technologies such as blockchain or biometrics play in the Swiss ID systems? Recently, passkey was introduced, and it's being used more and more in order to have better security in connecting to services. That I think is part of this consideration of blockchain and biometrics.
Okay, these are big buzzwords. Let me start with the biometrics, which is also quite a sensitive topic. Maybe you recall already a few years ago, there was also a federal vote on the introduction of the passport with biometric information, and that was almost rejected. There we have to be really careful. The electronic identity will contain biometric information, meaning your picture. That is also included in the passport or on the identity card. It will be exactly the same picture that will be included in the electronic identity. During the onboarding process, we will capture a short video sequence of you to compare this video sequence with the picture that we have in our database to make sure that we are dealing with the same person. There we have biometric information, and the comparison will be assisted by artificial intelligence, or at least an algorithm. I'm not sure if it is the right thing to say that it is artificial intelligence. So these are the instances where biometric data or biometric technology will be used. Now, when it comes to blockchain, that is a vast topic, and I prefer to stick to a rather orthodox definition of blockchain, meaning a blockchain is a blockchain when it involves proof of work, and when you have this what is the right word? Permissionlessness. And obviously, this kind of technology we do not need to operate a electronic identity. So in that sense, I would clearly say there will be no blockchain used for the electronic identity. When it comes to the registries, which allow to verify if a specific eID is authentic and valid, we will work with certain databases or ledger or distributed ledger technologies for sure, but I would not call them blockchains.
Given the fact that the same picture that is in our passport or ID card will also be used in the eID, I hope that we will upgrade the quality of the cameras being used and train the people at the places where we have to establish our identity and have our pictures taken, because my picture in my passport has been with me for almost 9 years and it's really horrible. So maybe allow to choose between a few shots so we can look a little better.
Okay. I will let my colleagues at the federal police know.
I don't know what your experience is. I don't know. We all look at our ID card pictures and we laugh at them because there's 10-year gap between some of them, and we age differently and have different facial hair or lost or put on weight. So we kind of change considerably.
Yes, that is correct. I am not here to talk about aesthetics.
Yes, it's a bit light-hearted.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. But the electronic identity, as I mentioned, is based on your analogous data, or the data that is already contained on your analogous document. And they have a certain validity and expiration date. Exactly due to that fact that we change also visually. And if you have a passport which is now 9 years old, then it will be not valid very soon. And I am sure that this time you will get a very beautiful picture, which displays all your handsomeness and charm. But yeah, there are also these rules that you should not laugh and show the teeth or not show the teeth. I don't remember the rules, but I agree. There are more happy moments than taking this official picture. Yeah.
What impact do you anticipate the eID will have on the everyday lives of Swiss citizens and businesses?
I really hope that our life will become easier. Already nowadays, it is hard to see anybody without a mobile phone. But for certain things, you still need also a purse with your driver's license or your identity card. Once we have the electronic identity available, you can actually walk around only with your mobile phone. And in many cases, you can also transact seamlessly without any rupture of technology. You will not have to, in the end, print out something, sign it, and send it in by mail. You can do the whole thing in one go. I really believe that this will help to improve services considerably. And then it really is an open question on how the society, how businesses will use this infrastructure and start innovate to provide new services, to provide more secure services, to innovate on all kinds of areas. It is really a rather flexible infrastructure with certain guardrails, obviously, but with many possibilities. And I have heard, or I was contacted already by a number of institutions of whom I've never thought of that they might use this infrastructure. So I'm really curious to see, and I'm quite confident that this will trigger a evolution that it can be very positive for each individual user, but also for the government to be more efficient and also for businesses. We are all part of a bigger whole.
How do you envision the eID evolving in the coming years, and what new functionalities might be introduced, such as pseudonymity? Maybe is it already thought of or planned or talked about?
Frankly, at the moment, we really focus on getting the first minimal viable product done. And this is already quite a task. We are descoping constantly to meet the timelines that have been given to us. And when it comes to like new functionalities and so on, the ones you have mentioned and many others, obviously we have a long list, but it's too early. Let's first get the basics done. Let's see how the population reacts. And then we have to see where the most urgent needs are to improve. It will not be the final implementation. Already from a security point of view, constant updates will be required anyway. And we definitely hope that both from the government point of view, but also from the private sector and the citizens, additional functionalities will be sought and that we can provide them. But the journey will only start when we launch.
On the Federal Office of Justice website, there's a scheduled path forward with a progressive rollout scheduled for 2026 if everything works out according to plans. Yes. Could you elaborate on the timeline and phased rollout of the eID project?
Yes, of course. So in the very short run, we need to come to a conclusion on how we actually implement the first implementation. What kind of technology are we going to use? What kind of cryptography? What kind of communication protocols? What kind of verifiable credential formats, and so on. There are a lot of questions under the hood that have to be decided on. We have promised last summer to come up with a decision by the end of the year. We are almost at the end of the year. The decision has not yet been taken, but we are working to get there very soon. So that would be the next milestone. Then in the beginning of next year, in the first quarter, we plan to launch what we call public beta. That will be an integration environment already using the final technologies, but still as a test environment. And there, businesses, other governmental agencies and private persons can start to play around with a wallet. They can issue what we call a beta ID and other stuff to get familiar with this whole thing. Then a little bit later, we will start with the expansion of the driver's license for learners to all Switzerland, and then sometimes in 26, hopefully rather earlier than later, the launch of the electronic identity and the trust infrastructure will take place.
You mentioned that it will be rolled out and start with a plethora of other services at the same time, such as the driver's license and other things. So which sectors or services will be prioritized and others that might come at a later stage?
We as the federal government can only influence what the federal government does. When it comes to cantons and municipalities, they are sovereign and autonomous, so we cannot force them to do. Certain things can be forced upon them, but most of it is optional. And even more so when it comes to private firms. There we are trying to encourage and educate these actors and make them keen on joining this trust infrastructure from an early stage. And the public beta will be, I believe, very useful in doing so, because there people, companies and other public authorities can really play around and look and feel how it works and what is possible, how much work it is and what it means and so on. So on top of the electronic identity, we, the Federal Office of Justice, will also provide, hopefully from the get-go, the verifiable credential with the registry of the criminal acts. We plan to provide the mobile driver's license. We are working on the residence registry, verifiable credential, and a number of others as well. Maybe also the debt registry certificate might be provided, if not for all Switzerland, at least for some. Yeah, I would say these are some of the more important use cases. Then another one, very important, which is not a verifiable credential, but maybe you have heard that already in the beginning of this year, the Federal Chancellery has launched a new, what we call standard service, a new login for public authorities. It's called AGOF. It is replacing the CH login. The big advantage of AGOF, this new login service for public authorities, is that it can be used not only on the federal level, but also on the cantonal and on the municipal level. And already a number of cantons, so far only from the German part of Switzerland, have integrated into AGOF. A number of cantons also from the French-speaking part of Switzerland will join next year. And once the electronic identity is available, you can then use the electronic identity as a means of identification to then trigger the login AGOF to access all kinds of services on the cantonal, federal and municipal level, but also, for example, to access your electronic health record and other services. So there will be really quite a lot of use cases with a lot of traffic only in this login space.
The health record that you mentioned is an interesting one because there is no real centralized place where all the health data is stored. When you go and have a hand scanner at a clinic, they centralize the data on their system. And if you go to another one, it's on a separate system. And is this something that you're concerned about and plan to have a project where everything will be centralized for individuals' health system under their e-identity?
First of all, with the eID, we do not centralize anything. So, no, we are not planning to centralize health data with the eID at all. Definitely not. The electronic health record is a project taken care of by the Federal Office of Health. We have obviously regular contact with them, but what the evolution of the electronic health record is concerned, I am definitely not the right person to ask. It is publicly known that the overall electronic health record shall be overhauled totally on a legal and also technical point of view, but in what direction it will go, I think is not yet decided and not something I should opine on. But what I can say very clearly is that the electronic identity can be used to access your electronic health record once, hopefully from the get-go.
We've been together for over an hour, and I would like to thank you for taking the time. I'd like to conclude by asking you, what is it that we are not talking about, but we should be?
I think when it comes to the electronic identity, we have touched upon all important aspects. Let's be honest, the electronic identity is important, but it is also a niche, or it is only a small part of a much wider landscape, digital landscape. And maybe one thing that we have not talked about at all is with the current structure of Switzerland, with 2,000 municipalities, with 26 cantons, with many different agencies and so on. We have a very complex setup which has historic roots, very understandable, but which, in my point of view, sometimes would deserve a little bit of questioning when we look at the potential that modern technologies provide, and also the threats and difficulties modern technologies provide, and where one has to ask oneself what unit actually is able to manage these technologies in a sensible way to actually take profit of it and not be just somehow dependent on it. So I would, when we now broaden a little bit the debate on digital transformation beyond the electronic identity, then obviously these kind of questions I would deem quite relevant. And there, in that context, one could go even beyond and not only talk about the administration, the government part of it, but also the political institutions and how these might evolve or should evolve, given the fact that we have all these new technologies that pop up and have sometimes important impacts on our daily lives. So I would argue that you have been quite talented in asking a lot of important questions covering the topic of eID, but when we talk about the overall digital transformation of a country, of a state, of a society, obviously many other questions would need to be addressed.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and a really enlightening conversation. Maybe we can meet again once the results of the votations are in to analyze the outcome and discuss what will happen next. Thank you again.